To people that aren't from Madison, welcome, welcome. My name is Kelly Meyer. I am the craft marketing coordinator for all intents and purposes. And just thank you so much for being here. Let me kick it off. Normal housekeeping stuff for AMA Madison. We have some upcoming events in February that we don't want you to miss. Our wonderful sponsor, Greg, will be our craft marketing speaker in February. We will be in person, not virtual, at least at this point, at Capitol Brewery here in Madison. Save the date for now. That registration should be up shortly, but we'll be talking revamping the marketing plan, leaner, meaner, and more effective. Don't want to miss that, February 22nd. We also have our signature speaker series back February 8th. That is virtual, so feel free to sign up for that. Video content done right, how to deliver videos that connect with your audience. Very important now that video is so crucial for your marketing plan. We will go into getting started with AMA. If you're local and not a member, you should become a member. Lots of great opportunities, networking with other professionals, learning from experts, connecting with local resources, not only local, but AMA National provides a ton of great resources when you're a member. Expand on your skills, a lot more. If you want to get in on the conversation, AMA does have a Slack channel that you can join to kind of get to know people and ask questions or post jobs or find jobs. You can find that at amamadison.slack.com. So join in that today, and I'll share that link in the chat as well. If you are already a member or just kind of interested in getting more involved, we have a lot of great volunteer opportunities. You can see those listed here. If you want to find out more information on these opportunities, amamadison.org/volunteer, or you can email at volunteer@amamadison.org. If you don't see something specifically on this list that you're interested in, but you want to be more involved, email us. We have something for you. We absolutely have space for you. And now I'll hand it over to Greg from Windbound, our wonderful sponsor.
Thank you, Kelly, our wonderful host. I appreciate it. Welcome everybody to Craft Marketing. A little bit about Windbound. We are a digital marketing firm based here in Madison. We focus on manufacturers and industrial companies, and we use content to help them, online content to help them create a digital twin of their sales team. And part of creating that content, a big thing that we really lean into is collaboration. So we like to collaborate with experts in the field. And craft marketing is a perfect example of that. So thanks to AMA for presenting craft marketing and allowing us to sponsor it. And very excited about today's presentation with Emma Roloff. She's the Director of Enterprise Solutions at Navient. Is it Navient or Navient, Emma?
Very Wisconsin, Navient. Just like say as much of a Wisconsin A as you can. And that's actually a part of our video strategy. We're going to make a video telling people how to talk about who we are, because even some of our employees from around the country don't get that Wisconsin A right. Okay,
perfect. Good content opportunity. I'll let her tell a little bit about herself and what she does with Navient. And she can get to that in a second. I met Emma through her husband, James, who has been a guest at Craft Marketing and works with Powder Keg Web Design. And, James and I would talk about how to get a presence on LinkedIn. And he said, yeah, this is what Emma's doing. And Emma's making inroads here. And finally, after a while, I'm like, well, let's just get Emma on Craft Marketing. She's obviously, and she's going to hate to hear me say this, LinkedIn famous. So I said, we got to get her on the show and find out what she's doing over there. So without further ado, Emma, take it away.
Thank you. I just saw that we stopped sharing the screen. So I will get mine up here and we'll kind of dive right into things. You're right, Greg. I don't like hearing the words famous because I don't feel like that's actually what I am, but I feel like I'm getting the opportunity to build a group of friends and a community on LinkedIn. And so what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the strategy that I use for that, give you some tips and tricks on how to build your own strategy with a little bit of the why mixed in and some of the results that myself and the team at Navient have seen. So just as kind of a little bit of a lead up, I think I'm going to start with a little bit of an analogy here. So I think everybody who's joined us has probably seen at least a part of this movie, The Wizard of Oz. And that's, there's tons of retellings and remixes, which we'll get into here in a moment. But part of the reason that this movie has such a long-standing reputation is because it's got something that I like to call lasting power. And the story of Wizard of Oz, the one that we know from the 1930s, that first, motion picture with color, actually wasn't the first telling of this story. It was a book originally, and it had actually been adapted into a movie 2 times before this rendition that has become a classic in our minds. So even that is a remix and a retelling of the original story. And that story and the characters and the components of it have so much lasting power that those characters have been taken and remixed and used in a different story like Wicked and other retellings that are, in books, as well as the musical that's pretty well known. And then last but not least, the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow has been on the charts 20 times since it originally debuted as a part of that movie. And again, it's something that's iconic and has got lasting power for our society. And so today, what I'm going to do, I promise there's a point to that, is take this idea of lasting power and apply it to the book that I teased as we were talking about this presentation and kind of on that title slide, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that book, the why of the need for a remix behind the principles that are a part of that book, and then transition into how to take those principles and apply them to your social strategy. Greg did a wonderful job giving an introduction, and you're probably you set me up perfect for this story. But my name is Emma Roloff, and I work with a company called Navient that's based just outside of Madison as our headquarters, but we have operations across the US, and our team is fully embracing that remote work lifestyle. In addition to helping our customers build a digital transformation strategy and implement intelligent automation solutions, over the last almost 2 years now, unfortunately, that's how long this pandemic has been going on, I have built a YouTube series that then is shared on LinkedIn and has helped me build a presence on LinkedIn called the Digital Transformation Talks. I joke that this series was born out of the fact that I was a sad salesperson, lonely at home, left to my own devices at the beginning of the pandemic. But really, what it comes down to is my sales style has always been very educational and consultative. And really quickly, I was forced to come to the realization that the way that I was used to going about educating my customers, helping them along in their buying journey, had to rapidly change. And so Greg mentioned James, who's down there in the corner with the little Bitcoin video there. That's my husband. He's in the sales and digital marketing space, and he acted as a bit of my own in-home consultant at the beginning of the pandemic. And we were talking through different things that I should try and, how do I go about finding a sales style that's still authentic to me, but allows me to continue to grow business within a admittedly very difficult time. And the idea of video came up, and my first response when he gave me the suggestion was like, nobody in my industry is doing that. I don't even know if my prospects or customers want to watch that kind of stuff. And then he lovingly reminded me that that's not a reason not to try something. And if anything, it's more of a reason to get going and find my voice within a space that maybe wasn't oversaturated already. And so that's kind of the origin story of what led to the series. And now I want to kind of take that bridge of that idea of lasting power and bring it forward to the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This idea of lasting power that I mentioned with The Wizard of Oz holds true for this book. And part of the reason that I mentioned The Wizard of Oz is that it was released back in the 1930s, around the same time that this book was initially put into publication. So it's over 75 years old, and it has over 30 million copies that have been sold since it was first released, and it still remains a bestseller because the principles that are in this book are still relevant today and still apply to the way that we do business. But it's our job now to take those principles and remix them with the new tools that are at our disposal. So, entrepreneurs, marketers, salespeople, we've all been looking for ways to influence buying decision for much longer than even Dale Carnegie's book has been around. But the simplicity of the way that he breaks down these principles of how to sell to people and lock into that idea of influence has that lasting power. And, what I want to talk about today is this idea that influence is not a new principle, but influencers are. So how can we use these tools to get our voice heard at a bigger, with a bigger audience? So I'm going to dive into a little bit of the why behind why I am so passionate about social selling and why I am here today to talk to you about kind of the benefit that it brings to your organization. So without being able to sit down and talk with each one of you, I'm not sure what mix we have in the room of B2B versus B2C. But the statistics that I'm going to talk through are focused in that B2B space because that's kind of where I live and breathe. But I would say that these are probably even higher percentages if we look at direct to consumer. Again, I want to stress, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know when I say the fundamentals of why people buy haven't changed, but how they go about that buying process has changed, and significantly so within the last 2 years. 70% of buyers will fully define their requirements for a solution before they've ever talked to a solution provider or a sales representative. And then even further into that, 44% of them will identify specific solutions that they want to bring into their organization before ever talking to somebody. And if your buyer is out there defining their requirements without you a part of the process, how can you get your differentiator in front of them and help that become a part of what shapes their buying decision? You need to figure out a way to be a part of that educational cycle. And of course, things like a website and strong SEO and content that's written that way is super powerful, but social media gives you a way to very quickly, efficiently, and cheaply spread the word of who you are and what you do. 84% of CEOs and VPs, according to IDC, use social media as a part of their decision-making process. So that means whether or not you want it to be a part of your strategy, executives in the B2B space are using your social media to help them make decisions. So it's really important that you take control of that social presence and be a well-known voice within your industry. According to LinkedIn, 92% of buyers that they surveyed said that they're willing to interact with a salesperson who has credibility that they attained by consistently sharing relevant content regularly on social media. So, if you're looking to connect with your buyers and that type of thing, I don't have all the percentages in front of me, but it was like a big 25% swing in between, like occasionally uses LinkedIn to is a thought leader, and much lower in terms of willingness to connect with somebody that they just see strictly as an order taker. And then last but not least, this one is actually from a book that I am reading called Social Selling Mastery, and I would suggest it to all of you as well, but it's 74% of buyers indicate that they purchase from the seller that helped them turn their vision into a reality and a clear path for execution throughout their sales cycle. And if we go back to that first area where we're looking at 70% of buyers setting their requirements and their vision before they interact with anybody, that means 74% of B2B buyers are buying from somebody that gave them value before they ever had a conversation. So if that's not enough of a reason to get you excited about sharing on social media, I guess maybe should be done for the day. So that brings us to the conclusion again that you need to have a social strategy as a part of your brand and as a part of how you go to market. And I think there's really three main areas that are critical to me that go along with this idea. Number one, I talked about it already, but it's brand awareness. You need to make sure that people are aware of who you are and what you do as early on in their buying process as you can. Sharing consistent information is going to give you authority within your industry and make it so that people trust who you are and what you're bringing to market, and that You can't fake posting relevant, valuable content every single day on LinkedIn if you don't know what you're talking about. So implicitly, you get that authority by just showing up and providing value from that standpoint. And to me, I think, Greg, you kind of put this in my little word bubble today on your post on LinkedIn. But the most important part of social media as a part of your strategy is making your brand human and giving your brand a face. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much we want to pretend it's all of our other differentiators and our solutions and our things that we bring to the table, people like people and people buy from people. So the more that you can bring a face and a human experience forward that can be synonymous with your brand, the more effective you're going to be. I have a really short video clip, and now I'm realizing I don't know if I need to do something to share my audio. Greg, do I need to do anything separate, or will it play my audio for me?
Ooh, Kelly, I don't know. Maybe just give it a shot. And
okay, I'm going to go just to kind of set the stage of this. It is an interview between Gary Vee and Kevin O'Leary from the Shark Tank, talking about the shift in Kevin O'Leary's thought process of social selling.
Binary. I used to have this joke, Gary. I used to tell people, what career should you have? And I'd say, well, there's 3 careers if you're going to go to college and invest in yourself: engineering, engineering, and engineering. But now, you know who I'm hiring? Story writers, videographers, photographers, editors. I'm having to compete all around the world. I hired some people in Israel and Italy and France to cut video because all of my companies are telling stories on their websites. And so we have now empowered a whole new generation of artists who are doing phenomenally well that I would have never guessed. Storytelling, direct communications with your customer, compelling them to watch that 19, 20, 39, 49-second video that communicates what your product or service is what the successful companies are doing. And we are spending millions of dollars doing this digital pivot.
Okay. Worth a watch of the whole interview. If you're interested, I can certainly share a link to that later, or even if you do your nice little Google search, it'll come up. But so now that we've talked a lot about that idea of why you need to have social media as a part of your strategy, I want to go more into some of the tactics conversation. And this is where that nice link to Dale Carnegie's book is going to come from. So one of the things that he talks about how to win friends and influence people is 6 ways to make people like you. And so I want to take these and show you how to use these tactics to get out and show up on social media. So first up is becoming interested in other people. And the principle within the book is becoming genuinely interested in other people. The best way to get started on LinkedIn is to get interested in content that other people are putting out on LinkedIn. Start by commenting on other people's posts, reading their newsletters, sharing articles that they might have on there, and adding in some zhuzh behind what your thoughts or takeaways from the pieces. Not only is this going to give you the opportunity to potentially build relationships with people as you're going through and tagging them in your posts, building out that network, but it's also going to give you a really low stakes way to start figuring out what your voice looks like on LinkedIn and building a cadence of how to begin posting. So I have a couple of screenshots up here that I want to talk through. The first one is going to be right below the yellow or the orange little box guy. And Allie Miller is a huge voice within the space of emerging technologies on LinkedIn. She has over 1 million followers. I think you can even see that kind of in like her little tagline here. She works for Amazon. And so interacting with her posts, because she has a large following within my space, gives me the opportunity, even if it's not directly related to technology, to have people within her network find me, look at my profile, interact with me, maybe start a conversation. This is just a really easy screenshot to take because it was a short comment that I could put on there. But a lot of times I'll ask a question or interact with other people that have commented on posts to, again, show them that I'm genuinely interested in the thoughts that they're bringing forward. The second screenshot over here is actually from a couple of months ago. It looks like it was 9 months ago, probably when I was still kind of trying to figure out what my cadence and style looked like on LinkedIn. And one of the things that I did to make sure that I always had content ready to go was I would listen to a podcast while I was folding laundry on Sundays. So I have 2 small kids. There's lots of laundry every week, and I'm one of those people that saves it all for one day. So I put in my headphones, I listen to a podcast, I listen to it, and I keep my phone app open to put in some notes for me in terms of what are my key takeaways. Then when I go ready Monday morning, first thing, I can pull up that notes app, put my post together. I'm going to be able to tag relevant people within my industry. I can share the link to the podcast that I listened to. And in this scenario, I even shared the link to my newsletter to talk about these are some of the types of ideas that I explore within my newsletter. As I mentioned before, this gives you the opportunity to start building that network. Felix, who I tagged in this, is a Harvard business professor. He interacted with the post. It gave me a wonderful opportunity to start sending messages back and forth with Felix about his book that I had just recently read. And then we were able to set up an interview, and I was able to have him on my interview series simply based by the fact that a conversation was started because I showed him I was interested in what he talks about. Next up is the principle of smiling. And this is kind of LinkedIn 101. So hopefully this isn't groundbreaking information for any of you, but making sure that you have a professional, happy profile picture that welcomes people in almost as if you were welcoming them into your home, I think is really important. Another area that sometimes people aren't using to optimize their profile is going to be that cover photo along the top. Use it as a nice call out for who you are, what you do, and how people can get into contact with you. Anybody that comes to my profile is going to see really quickly, ooh, this girl really likes transforming organizations and she likes technology, and oh, look, she looks friendly. And so that's what you want people to see that because that's going to make them want to interact with you. And then kind of like next level, if you really are interested in putting together a content strategy and you want to feel fancy, you can enable creator mode within LinkedIn. Anybody can do it. You just have to go into your settings to do that. And that gives you the ability to do things like add in your hashtags of what you talk about and what your interests are, and then add in a cover video. So when people go to my profile, they will look at my profile and they'll be greeted by this video that's me talking about what I'm here on LinkedIn to do. So again, just trying to make your profile as welcoming as you can for anybody that's interested in connecting with you. The third principle, kind of going back to those initial ones from the book that we're remixing, is that remembering people's name to that person is going to be the sweetest, most important sound in their language. Everybody is conditioned to love their own name. Everybody wants to engage with people that know who they are and interact with them. And so a really, really easy way to, again, kind of use this principle on LinkedIn is to tag people in your responses when you're interacting with them in comments. So when you are talking to somebody, even if it's as simple as thanks for watching and contributing to the series, I put in Vandana's tag. So not only does she know that I'm responding to her email, she gets double the excitement and dopamine hit from 2 different notifications coming into her feed that not only did I respond to a comment that she commented, but I also tagged her in a comment as well. And so this makes them feel extra special. And then kind of like, again, when we're looking at these LinkedIn basics and tactics, making sure that you respond to every person that comments on one of your posts, even if it's as simple as thank you. Honestly, in this scenario where there was just 3 light bulbs, I didn't have anything super witty to come back with in that scenario, but thanking him for coming, watching, and commenting on my content is enough to make them realize that you recognize that they're there and they're supporting you. And eventually, as you start to build out your reputation and your space within the industry, hopefully other people will start to do the same for you and start to spread the word about who you are and what you're doing within your space. And so people will start to tag you in posts to start conversations with you. And when I look at this post, some of these people that I'm included in here with, I've got a little over 4,000 followers. Pascal, I think, is close to 800,000. And suddenly I get to be in the same group with him, with people that are in our industry and within my target market, just simply by building the network through these tactics that I'm talking about today. Up next is the idea of being a good listener and encouraging other people to talk about themselves. I think the most easy way for me to demonstrate how I have put this tactic into place is through my interview series. And, I've had the opportunity now to talk with over 100 different people within the space of digital transformation from across the entire world. And it's given me a really great opportunity to broaden my thought process within the industry, hone in on my message based on how I ask questions. But ultimately, I think the biggest benefit for me through this is getting exposure to those people's networks, but then also building genuine relationships with every single person that I've gotten to do an interview with. I may not stay in contact with them day to day, but I know when something exciting happens, like when I got my promotion earlier this year, I think almost every single one of those people was genuinely excited for me and came and engaged with that post and helped me get traction there. So anything that you can do, again, to get people interacting with you and sharing their viewpoints can be a really powerful way for you then in turn to build your following and voice within LinkedIn. Another really great way to do this is through polls. And there's a reason that polls are as popular as they are, is because they get people to engage. And so sometimes I use them for really silly things, just as like a post to get out there and help people get to know who I am. And those ones, oftentimes, the easier that they are for people to interact, the more engagement you'll get. This one was pretty specific to who I am and what I do and my niche within my industry. And so you can see it had a lot of views, not as many votes, but that's okay, because then I can look at those votes and understand who in my network is engaged in the conversation and what are the things that they care about based off of how I'm putting these polls out there. And I can use them as a tool to then start speaking to people's interests. And so the fifth, and I think, oh, I've got a 3 there instead of a 5. Clearly I can count, everybody. But the 5th principle is to talk in terms of other people's interests. And I think this is where kind of the experimenting and the part to me that's really fun about LinkedIn comes in. And that is, I mentioned earlier on, there's lots of different types of content that you can put out there. Commenting on somebody's post is content. Sharing somebody else's article that they wrote on a blog and giving your thoughts is content. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated, but as you start to do more and more on LinkedIn, you're going to find what's the type of content that you really enjoy. So earlier I shared that I used to do a Monday podcast post where I would listen to something and then I would share my thoughts on what that was that I listened to. Honestly, that post wasn't really me. I didn't really like that content all that much. And so over time, as I got more comfortable, I started to put different types of content out onto LinkedIn to see if it resonated with the audience that I was building. And, the ideas behind what I was posting and how I got started versus where I am today are different through this kind of iterative process. So early on, when I first started on LinkedIn, I talked a lot about the technology that's behind what we do at Navient. So might not be super exciting to a bunch of marketers, but things like robotic process automation and AI and machine learning, I talked a lot about the technology itself. And through my interview series, I was able to hone in on the fact that every time I brought one of these people forward to talk about technology, I started veering the conversation with my questions back to people, because that's what I'm interested in. And then I started realizing as I looked at my analytics that my target demographic didn't really care what tool was doing the work for them. They cared that it was getting done. They cared about the business outcome, and they cared about how it affects the people that work in their company. And so slowly but surely, I realized the things that I liked talking about were the things that other people were interested in. And this example that I have up on the slide here is actually from a TikTok video. And this was, again, something that was kind of like, honestly, I got teased a little bit internally. Like, oh, do you think you're 16, Emma? What are you doing out there on TikTok? And it feels a little silly to make those videos, but I'm also that kind of person. I like to make people smile. I like to make people laugh. So why not find a way to take the principles that I want to talk about, the things that I'm putting forward in my more serious content, and find a way to show who I authentically am. And this goes back to kind of what I talked about from the idea of why do you want to be doing this? It's to put a human brand forward, make yourself human, but also from a sales perspective, I want anybody that goes to my LinkedIn to feel like they know what it's going to be like to work with me as a partner. I want them to feel like they know and trust me and can come into an engagement with me and know that I'm going to do what's right for them, and hopefully have a little fun while we're at it. And so that's kind of, as you start to go, you can figure out how to speak to the interest of your target market and your target personas, as well as doing something that feels really authentic to you. And then the last principle here that's kind of tagged to this, to the book, is the idea of making other people feel important, but doing so sincerely. And this is pretty closely tied to the idea of saying people's names or interacting with people through comments, and kind of like what we talked about earlier. But I do also like to point this out because it's bringing people into a conversation that genuinely feels natural for them, I think, is where you get into being able to tag people in comments or posts and have it feel authentic. We've all seen those posts and probably been tagged in them where it's like 750 people and the person making the post maxed out on how many people they could tag in it. And you're like, I don't even know what to comment because this doesn't have anything to do with me. But I think there's nothing wrong with tagging 10 people that you know will have thoughts on what you have to share. Or in this scenario, I hope that Dave and Jordan went and looked at this post, found it interesting because it made me remember the interviews that I did with them. The other piece that this kind of idea of making people feel important and tagging them kind of extends nicely into is it gives you the ability to be a connector on LinkedIn too. And I said, you know, I don't like the idea of being famous. I like the idea of making friends. And I like the idea of connecting friends with other friends. And one of my favorite things to do is, as I connect with someone and start interacting with their posts, all of a sudden seeing my network merge with their network and vice versa, because we're all engaging in a conversation. So my hope would be that maybe Dave went, and you can't fully see Jeff's post, but maybe Dave went and checked out Jeff's LinkedIn and decided to connect with him. Or oftentimes I will also use that as an opportunity to maybe send them a message to say, hey, I think you guys should be friends. You have a lot in common and you guys could have some interesting conversations. It's also, oh, okay, my animation didn't work there. I had another example to show you, but it's apparently lost in purgatory. But it's, again, tagging people, and sometimes it's tagging other customers or people that you want to have engaged in the conversation, to see that you're highlighting them as an example of what other people should be doing in the industry. Oh, it did come up. There we go. So I tagged Andrea on this because I think she does a really great job of celebrating when a project goes live with her team, and she always brings a cake forward. So I, you know, like those types of things where it's personal and actually has meaning and sincerity behind it. So now I want to transition to this idea of the key to influencing others. And this is going to be kind of the point where I talk a little bit about some of the results that we've seen from our team, but also, again, kind of the driving factor behind what I do. So this quote is from the book, and this is actually what made me kind of come up with the idea for this presentation as a whole. And it's the idea that the only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. And I am very open about the fact that on LinkedIn, I am there to help demystify the idea of digital transformation and help my clients and people that are following me educate themselves and put a strategy forward of how they can actually implement a solution or solutions that meet their needs. And so I like this because I think it gives you a really clear-cut way of how to start shaping that voice if you want to influence people. It's not being fancy and funny. If those videos were just funny, I wouldn't be targeting my demographic and I wouldn't be getting sales results or, you know, things that convert to website traffic or the rest of what we're going to get in here in a moment. So a bit about kind of what I've seen in terms of my personal profile and like my limited analytics that I can get through LinkedIn itself. I have a strategy, and we'll get into this about kind of like setting what your strategy looks like. I post 5 times a week. I feel like making that commitment is enough for me. Nobody needs me on Saturdays and Sundays. That's my time for singing with my kids in the living room. So across those 20 posts that I did in the month of December, I had 107,000 views or impressions on that content. So again, it's something that I think is really important to share as a part of that is some of those posts had less than 1,000 views on them. Some of those posts had over 15,000 views on them. Not everything you do is going to be a hit, and don't be discouraged when that happens. I've experimented with enough stuff on LinkedIn where I've literally had a post get 47 views, and that's like, oh, okay, not even my whole company looked at what I have to say in this scenario. So not everything is going to be a smash hit, but that consistency and continually getting out there and putting those posts in front of people, you then will have stuff that takes off. My LinkedIn profile views have been kind of consistently growing over time, and they typically, as I'm sure is the same for anybody that pays attention to that, have big upticks and then big falls and back and forth again. So it does look a little crazy when you look at the overall view. But over the course of the last month, 12% of the profile views that I've received across all of the couple of thousand that come to my profile during that time are considered interesting. And LinkedIn categorizes that based off of what leads I have saved within Sales Navigator for my ideal customers, and even some people that are saved leads of my own, as well as executives within my industry. So again, I feel like that's a pretty good percentage. Ideally, I would love to see all of my views become interesting and not have anybody else just checking me out for the sake of it. But that also includes other buyers too, not necessarily just executives that I'm targeting and flagging within Sales Navigator fall outside of that 12%. So when we take a look at buying behavior, one of the stats I didn't put earlier in, but I think is, I don't have like the exact statistic in my mind, but it's like over 50% of the researchers within an organization that are going out and gathering information about solutions are millennials that are using social media, using your website, and out there using social strategies to help them make their buying decision. So they might not show up in this interesting, but they might take a video that I made and put it in front of their executive for me. Or they might take my content and share it, and I don't have visibility into what's happening in their network, but the right set of eyes gets on that video that they shared for me. So I think it's also important to recognize not everybody needs to be that exact target demographic. And then over the course of this journey, again, that like 18 months or so, I've had over 3,000 new followers that have joined my quest for kind of learning about and demystifying digital transformation. So switching gears a little bit to the organization as a whole, we have seen a 73% increase to Navient's YouTube subscribers since we started consistently posting our interview series out on the website and kind of optimizing that. So I don't want to pretend that it's all social media, like all LinkedIn that we're doing that's driving these results. It's a tied strategy that also bubbles up to a part of our larger digital strategy as a team. But again, that 73% increase is pretty exciting. We've seen a 60% increase on our LinkedIn followers as well. And so it's fun to see those go hand in hand, and keeping in mind that especially on LinkedIn, I'm the one that's sharing my content and it's coming from me as an individual, but the brand is still seeing the benefits of it. And then one of the statistics that I'm most excited about is that we've also seen, and this is just in the last calendar year, 129% increase in new website visitors coming directly from LinkedIn or YouTube. So it is making a substantial difference to the traffic that we get that's tied to our larger digital strategy And as a response to that, our whole team up to our VP of marketing and our CEO understand the importance of a social strategy being a part of what we do. And we're working to expand that across the organization. So as we round out our conversation, I just want to touch on my tips of how to get started, kind of reiterating some of the stuff that we talked about before. If you're new to LinkedIn and just getting started, start by sharing other people's content and interacting with it. Very minimum liking stuff and getting more comfortable with that process gives you the ability to then start commenting and creating your own posts in that way and building slowly over time. Then if you really want to get wild, you can start making videos like I am and it's not, Greg, you've done one with me. It's nothing fancy. It's me in my office here or my office at home talking to a webcam. You will find plenty of people that tell you you need all the fancy equipment in the entire world. You need a webcam and some lighting, and you can get started. That doesn't mean there isn't room to improve from there. And it sounds like there's an event coming up to talk about how to maybe up your game there, but that's all you need to get started. And then the biggest thing that I would say is to be consistent and set a schedule for yourself. So I kind of gave a little bit of hint of like my podcast Mondays in my mind. That was my scheduled day. But I do now, a part of my LinkedIn presence is a LinkedIn Live series called The Third Thursday. So every Thursday of the month, it's tied to the third Thursday. I now do TikTok Fridays. So my post for Friday is always a TikTok. And then I have other strategies that I use to figure out what the rest of my content is going to look like to get going. But I've set that idea for myself from a calendar standpoint. And again, I made a commitment to post 5 times a week. And then I post around the same time every day too, just to keep that habit ingrained. So sometime between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., you're going to see my post go out every day. Do I hit that perfectly every time? No, but just how I work internally, if it's 10:05, I feel a little guilty. So the next day it's 9:05 that I'm posting that post. But that commitment and that consistency just builds a habit. And then my last couple of takeaways here, again, are it doesn't have to be fancy to get results. These videos here, and I do want to put my little caveat here that this one's actually number 6, but I didn't like aesthetically how that looked on the slide, so I adjusted. But these are search terms that are big within our industry. So what is process mining? What's OCR, RPA, content services? When you search those terms on Google, we might not rank number 1 on the Google results, but when you go over to video, you're going to see that this process mining video that I made in my daughter's closet during COVID with a little lights, shining on me with a white backdrop behind me is ranked number 4 for Google's results for video. Number 3 for what is OCR. RPA actually, again, shows up number 6. And then what is content services? It's the number 1 video that comes up. For me, this is such a huge way to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be fancy, because these videos that I'm ranked up against are huge software companies that are working to get the word out about why their products are needed. And they're companies with these giant marketing teams. And again, I did it in my daughter's closet during COVID with a Word document in front of me, halfway reading, halfway memorizing. It doesn't have to be perfect. And some of these have well over 6,000 views on LinkedIn, which again, for like a non-sexy term like RPA is exciting to me. And then after time, you can start to build in a strategy that has, and you can see my little dig pulling people along, brings other people from your organization in. So now Navient has started to step up our game as we have this initiative as an organization, but we're still not a huge team. We have under 100 employees nationwide. Our marketing team, in terms of who's supporting digital marketing, is really, I would say, 2.5 people plus myself. And then we have some partners that are hopefully joining us today, or are names that you'd be familiar with that are supporting us from an SEO standpoint, web design, that kind of thing. So we do rely on experts in some areas. But now we have videos that include our CEO and other executives within the organization. We've started doing things like making sure that we're nominating our team members for different awards. So that little video clip at the top there was Greg Alber, who's our VP of Professional Services, and myself meeting with an international publication for awards that we won earlier this year. We're launching new series to talk to different personas that might not be interested in my interview series to continue to tap into our target market differently. And so it's that kind of evolution and growth over time that's probably the most exciting part of this to me. So again, just to kind of touch on those ideas, these principles are not something that's new. I have a feeling every single one of them was something that you innately knew within your heart. But even though those messages came from the 1930s, there's still plenty of ways that you can apply them to what you're doing today. So with that, thank you everybody for listening to me ramble for a while.
Thanks, Emma. We do have a couple of questions. If anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can go ahead and ask them out loud as well. To start it off, to throw it back to way in the beginning of the presentation, you showed those 3 stats. Do you have the source for those?
Yes, here, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can go back to my notes real quick. Uh-oh, that's what I wanna do. So the first one here, one second, let me pull it up. I should have done a better job of reading those off. When I get going, I just talk and I don't always look back at my notes.
No worries, you had a really good rhythm going, so I didn't want to interrupt the flow. So wait until the end.
Okay, so the first one was from COS Insights. And that's that 70% of buyers fully define their requirements, and then kind of that further designation of the 44% of solutions are being decided on before you ever engage with them. The next one about CEOs and VPs using social media as a part of their buying decision is from IDC. And then the last one, the 74% of buyers purchasing from the first person that provides value, is a Forrester statistic, but I also got that one specifically from that social selling mastery book that I mentioned as well.
And when you were talking about video analytics on LinkedIn, can you elaborate on how you access those analytics? And can any profile view how your video is doing, or is it just you?
Yep, guys, maybe I'm gonna open myself up for a quick demo here. Let's see if I can do it and talk at the same time. Okay, hold on, let me share my screen again. Okay, so I'm gonna come in here to my posts and I'm just gonna go and so when you post a YouTube link, like I do with my interview series, you can look at the analytics of the post itself. So this was my one from earlier today. We'll go into that. You do get a little bit more information if it's a native video. So I want to show you guys my TikTok Friday. Watch that one. Ed, who joined me for it, is a very funny guy. But you can see, and when you click on that link at the bottom of your post that says how many views you've got, this is nothing, this is just LinkedIn's native analytics. So it will show you, you can look at like the reactions, comments, shares. It will give you, this usually doesn't show up until a couple of days, but it'll give you like a graph of who engaged. And then you can also go up and switch it to your audience, and it will start to show you who were the top companies that engaged with your content, what were the titles of those people, and where were those people in the world when they were looking at your post as well. Caitlin, how did I do with my demo? Am I going to put some people out of work at Navient?
I hope I can get to keep my job.
Oh, not you. I meant our solution engineers that are meant to do demos.
Oh.
The videos that you post on LinkedIn, do you repurpose? So I know you repurpose, obviously, well, not natively, YouTube onto LinkedIn, but do you repurpose your LinkedIn videos you post natively across different social platforms?
So we do the interview series and some of the other stuff that we've got in the works will all natively live on YouTube and then be posted to LinkedIn. We haven't found, just with our target demographics, a ton of success for like our solution marketing on things like Instagram or Facebook. That being said, we use them a lot for like culture and getting people engaged in who we are and wanting to come join our team. So we do have a presence there. Kara, you would be the one that would be reposting that information. Sorry, I'm calling on you guys out of the blue, but reposting that onto the other social channels. Do we get much traction with any of that, or are you posting those on any other platforms?
For more significant videos, we do sometimes try putting them on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. But Facebook is, again, as you said, people are more interested in the culture-based content, so we don't do that as much anymore. And Twitter, not a lot of people in our target audience are on Twitter, so it's not a huge focus for us. So I don't usually do that, but I do sometimes, and whenever I do, it's not huge, but we also haven't put in a ton of time into growing our Twitter or anything, so maybe it would be possible, but not this time.
I've also seen some of our like solution partners that are more on the software side, not necessarily really even take off on Twitter, unless they're like engaging in angry Twitter rants and that kind of thing. But I've seen them try and go about it, and it just doesn't seem to resonate the same way that we find on LinkedIn. So we've put a lot of our effort into YouTube and LinkedIn because those are the ones that we've seen a lot of success with.
You have another great question in the chat. So what's the end game of your video? Obviously, if it's for a business, the end game is you want to eventually get sales, right? So how does your 100,000 likes equate into revenue? And do you have numbers yet from your efforts that support what you're doing on social?
So I think the number one thing to say is that like there's a certain amount of discretion that goes into what you're attributing to what you're putting out on the internet, into especially a sales cycle that's as complex as ours. So I didn't talk a lot about what Navient does on the front end of things, but our sales cycle is traditionally somewhere between, I would say, 6 to 12 months on the low end. So there's a lot of touches, there's a lot of education that has to happen. I do anecdotally know which customers I've pulled my video strategy into, and like then seeing what I think are positive interactions that come after that. So for example, last year I had an RFP that I was doing. And so as a part of that RFP, I included video in that strategy. I included links to stuff in my RFP response to, again, show the credibility of what we're doing. Do I know if that's the reason that we won the business? No, we could probably do a bit more in terms of like detailed surveying and that kind of thing on the back end. But I also don't think that somebody would necessarily attribute us winning that business to that video that was included in that response. So it's kind of blended into how I go about sales. So it's not like a great stance from like being able to say, yep, here's the statistic I can drop for you. But in terms of conversions I didn't talk a lot about it. Because the newsletter didn't have a great comparison that I could say, like, here's where it's grown from, because it started at 0 at the beginning of all of this. But we've seen about 250, Caitlin, is that right? Okay, about 250 people opt into a newsletter that we created as a part of this strategy. And I will get responses from that newsletter. I have people that reach out to me via message, like even earlier today, I had someone that was like, hey, you came up in my mind as a part of a conversation. Do you guys do X, Y, and Z? Can you help us with that? And so, like all of those things start to add up and start to equate to sales. It's just hard to attribute it specifically to a video.
Greg, you do a lot of video. Do you have anything to add to that?
I wouldn't say do a lot. I do a lot for AM. Yeah.
More than the average.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just bring up this point. I think what was really cool, what you're talking about, Emma, was you kind of found your groove, right? You found what you were comfortable with. And one of the things I've been doing and recently is just I'm really more comfortable writing. And LinkedIn allows for text posts, right? And they can allow for some pretty lengthy ones. And it's a good way for you to show your expertise. So if video isn't your jam, you can also write and use the text. And I've actually been doing some posts and getting a lot of good response on that. So I think it's kind of like where you feel really comfortable being out there. But I did also want to just follow up. Do we have any other comments or questions, Kelly, right at the moment?
Not right now, nope.
Just a couple of things I wanted to follow up with. First of all, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for sharing all that information with us. I did share a post on commenting that I wrote recently, just because I feel like people don't give that enough credit for being a form of content and interacting on LinkedIn. And you mentioned it yourself, and you do it quite a bit. That's part of your routine, right? I mean, I always say I have to get 3 comments a day at least. What do you have? Is that part of your goals and what you do?
So early on, I would say I set a goal for myself to do 5 a day. And then I also looked for 5 people to connect with every day. Yep. Honestly, I don't necessarily keep track anymore, because a lot of times I'm like commenting on other people's stuff as I'm getting tagged in it, and or in response to my own posts on a daily basis. So I'm not quite as consistent with that. But if I do notice that I'm not seeing the type of engagement that I would hope for, or something isn't taking off, I will go make a purposeful effort to go and interact with other people's content. Because again, they're gonna more likely than not reciprocate what you're doing for them and go and interact with your posts from that standpoint. And or people will just naturally find their way to your profile the more you keep popping up in their feed.
Exactly. I think it's just a great way for somebody, if they're not a big content producer, salesperson, everybody can comment on something. You know, if you're selling it, you're going to have an opinion, right? I hope, maybe.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to say is about, you mentioned community and how you found your peeps on LinkedIn. And I feel like this is something that people don't talk enough about. I got a guy on here, Joseph Lewin, who's in the manufacturing community that I'm a part of. And that's when, to me, LinkedIn got really cool, is once I started to make some friends on there. And you talk about making friends. Once you start doing that, that's when I think LinkedIn, or you really start to see the benefits, because you're building your referral network, people support your content, the thing just really starts to snowball. Could you talk about just how you got into the community and how you found your place?
I would like to pretend that it was a really grand strategy where I targeted specific people. But admittedly, it was just, I see what happened with COVID and the pandemic as a really great blessing for me in terms of my career and what it's done for this specific piece of my strategy for sales. Because I never would have taken the time to dive into this had I, again, like I joked about at the beginning, been a sad, lonely salesperson trapped in my house with James alone all day. So that was part of it, was I just started going out and engaging with people. But I think the best way to talk about this, so I didn't talk much about the Third Thursday, which is the LinkedIn Live series that I do. That I think is a really, really great example of community building and making connections with people, because it all happened, like my co-host is in Ireland. Kieran and I have never met in real life, and it'll probably be a little while before I can get my act together and get over there. So he and I completely remotely, like, don't talk to strangers on the internet, broke those rules. And he reached out to me initially from what I was doing on LinkedIn. And it was pretty early in the interview series, so I wasn't doing a ton of video. That was when I was putting out my text posts, going back to what you were saying, Greg, sharing my thoughts that way. And he saw something that I had posted, or maybe it was vice versa. One of us commented on somebody based off of hashtags in a common industry. Then he reached out to me, and at the time, Kieran is very similar to you, Greg. So he actually is not a huge video fan, even though I've forced him into the video space with our series. His thing was long form LinkedIn articles with quotes from his network. And so what Kieran would do is he would create a post, and he had like a series that the first one he asked me for was like the A to Z of intelligent automation. And he had 26 different articles, and he was constantly reaching out to other people to get quotes for his articles. So he reached out to me for a quote. I said, oh, hey, now that I'm looking at your profile, are you interested in doing an interview? Then we got that opportunity to interact with one another outside of the platform with the interview. And then slowly but surely, then when I got my LinkedIn Live access through the beta, I reached out to him and said, so I've got this, and I think it was like 30 days, maybe 30 days to use it. What are we going to do? You want to join me for a panel discussion? And then we decided to start the series. And so then both of us organically were able to bring forward people to be a part of that. And we see the same names continually coming forward. It's once a month. It's not a huge ask. It's 30 minutes. They can always join the recording, but that's also a big part of, now I have this group of people that come and hang out with me every third Thursday of the month.
Sure.
They know who I am. They know I make up words. They know I embarrass myself and I don't edit it out. They know who I am. And now they are willing to engage with my content and tag me in things and help me push forward my reputation. So it happened pretty organically in my scenario, but I would agree that that's part of my favorite part of what LinkedIn is.
No, and that's so right on the point in terms of like start small and let it happen naturally. That's exactly how I got into my community. There's two guys, Chris Lukey and Jeff Long, and the one of them reached out to me and said, "Hey, I see you're doing manufacturing marketing. Let's start an engagement pod." And we were going to do this structured thing, and that fell apart like almost instantly. But we got to be friends, and then it grew and grew, and it's really cool when it happens. I think though, you kind of got to figure out your niche, right? You got to kind of focus on who you can't do this with, if you're trying to reach everybody, it makes you focus as a marketer and hone in on what you want to do.
And that's just what I've kind of done over time is like through that interview series, there is, in the space of automation, I call them like the RPA groupies that care a lot about the technology. And I love them and I would happily engage with them all day, every day. But going back to the question of like, what is your purpose on LinkedIn and what are your results? They are not the people that are buying solutions from me. And quite frankly, I can't always have the technical conversations that they want to be having with me because that's not who I am. But again, I started to see this trend of like, ooh, I talk a lot about how do we engage the people in this process. And ooh, that fits really well with what Navient does and what our methodology is. And change management is really critical to why we're successful. And I like talking about it and people like listening to it. So let's figure out what that message looks like and kind of honing that. I have to give some credit to James again. I mentioned that he's my in-house consultant. There's been a couple of nights where we're after dinner sitting at the table and I'm like, okay, I need to just like start writing this stuff down, and he'll ask me questions and I'll write down ideas. And like, I'm really lucky that I have that sales enablement consultant sitting in my kitchen with me every day. But that again, it happened over time. I didn't have that messaging honed in perfectly at the beginning. I've gotten there now.
Okay. Do you find, just one last question from me, do you find that you're putting together programs based on getting guests, or are you building your LinkedIn programs more around topics, or is it a mix of both?
I would say it's a mix of both. I typically have ideas of different types of content that I want to create, and I have a pretty good pulse now from what I'm doing and the trends in our industry and the things that are also important to our company and highlighting, and how those things can merge together and what my social strategy looks like. And so I will strategically pick certain guests or reach out to certain people because I know that they have an expertise in an area that I want to have a conversation on. Other times it's, hey, I've seen this person popping up a lot. They've got a strong reputation. We're in the same space. We have similar connections. Why don't I just talk with them and figure out if there's a way for us to collaborate? And then something cool will come out of it in the end. So I have usually about a month or so. Caitlin and Kara are laughing at me because they've been on the end of my tight deadlines before. But I usually have a content buffer that's set up that gives me a little bit more room to be able to choose who I want to bring in and have those conversations. And so like looking out at my calendar, I've got another 4 or 5 conversations that are booked. All of those ones, because I have that buffer, are people that I strategically reached out to because I want to have a conversation with them. Instead of, and I have been in that place where I call up one of our consultants and I say, I don't have any content for this week and I need an interview because something fell through. So you're going to come sit down with me and have a conversation on this. And that's kind of going back to the consistency piece of it. I could get better at repurposing content, but I like to have my interviews every week.
Sure. I think also what I really like about what you mentioned before is, this is a referral business. I mean, we get so focused on leads coming in through our digital marketing, but nobody takes into account the referral networks that you build. And you mentioned getting some referrals. I mean, somebody asked me, has LinkedIn been successful for me? And I started thinking about all our recent clients and I'm like, man, they're almost all referrals that have come in through LinkedIn connections. So I just don't think people think referral mindset with their initiatives.
That's actually something I talk a lot about internally, to get other people excited about what our strategy looks like. And I use the example of like when we go to market, we have a couple of markets that we have a really, really strong reputation in. And everybody that kind of falls into that category knows who Navient is and knows that they're the person to come to for that type of solution. And you feel a little bit like a rock star when you walk into a convention full of these people because they know who Navient is, they know what you do. And like, especially for us, we share a name with a not so fun student loan provider company. So going somewhere where people know who you are and what you do and that it's not tied to student loans is a big deal. Now think if you can take that and you can make that an international reputation where all of a sudden, when you walk into any conversation, they know who you are because you've built that reputation and hopefully have those referrals that come through that reputation. It takes that idea and that reputation that we have in that one industry and puts it on steroids and blows it up across the world. And so that's what I would like to do is get everybody to forget about the student loan Navient. They're going out of business. Think of us and digital transformation when you hear that name. That's really what my goal is when I'm going about it. And hopefully there's referrals of people that want to work with us along the way.
Wait a second. Now you just said to me that you walk into a room and people know who you are.
Oh, no, Greg, that's not my industry. That's actually some of the other salespeople spoken. I'm building that now in insurance. That's what I'm trying to do is to get our reputation in the insurance industry because there's a lot of outdated processes and a lot of paper and a lot of things that can be automated and make people's lives a lot better. But the insurance industry is also very close knit and very reputation, very referral heavy. So
Okay.
to get into that space, you have to do that a different way than we've been able to do in person in some of our other industries.
Got it. Got it.
Not famous, Greg. You're never going to convince me of it.
Well, cool. Well, I don't know, Kelly, we should let Emma, or I should let Emma get to her family. And I just want to say thank you so much again, Emma, for joining us here tonight.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. And if you haven't already, connect with me on LinkedIn, send any questions that you've got my way. I'm happy to have a conversation individually as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Bye.
All right.